All right, exciting guest today. Welcome to the show. We have on writer-director Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, I got the opportunity to watch one of your latest films that came out called Ghosts of the Void. I wanted to kind of bring you on, talk about how you got, into this project, um, a little bit about your career, your origin story, and then we'll kind of dive into, single location thriller slash suspense films.
Sure.
All right, tell me about how you came upon the idea of Ghosts of the Void.
Um, well, it really just started with me looking for a concept that I could make my directorial debut. Um, yeah, because I've been trying to get other projects off the ground that were a little bit
Okay.
bigger, a little bit, things that I probably had no business trying to get made as a first feature, more money than anybody was probably going to give a first time director. So they always say like, look in your backyard, see what you got, you know, and I finally kind of came around and said, okay, I'll make that movie. I'll write that script. That's that simple thing that can get done on a low budget. And I started to think about what I had around me, and I was sitting in my car and said, well, let's just make a movie that takes place in a parked car. And
Oof.
kind of from there, like, well, why would somebody be in a parked car? Well, maybe they're living in their car, and it kind of blossomed from there. I knew I wanted it to be horror because I love horror, and so, but I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know what kind of horror it would be. I just knew that it
Yeah,
was going to involve something happening to people living in their car. I just started writing and saw where it went. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of the origin of the script and the story, how that ended up happening. As far as making it goes, I ended up going to a buddy of mine, Seth Savoy, who I had written a script with him called Echo Boomers a few years ago that he directed. And he
nice.
kept kind of coming to me after that film, like, "Hey man, if you ever got something that you need to get off the ground, let me know," because he has a lot of resources that he made through that film, and connections that he made through that film. So he had a lot more connections and resources than I did for getting stuff off the ground. And so he asked me, "Hey, what do you got? You know, give it to me, and we'll make it happen." And so I gave him the script, and he liked it, and within a year we were shooting it. So
That's amazing.
um,
Was it difficult getting funding? I mean, this is your first directorial
um,
debut.
for me, no, because I honestly didn't have to do that much. Seth kind of took the lead on that, which I'm very
Awesome.
fortunate for. A lot of
Yeah.
first time indie filmmakers don't have that luxury, but I really did just kind of have to sit back and, let him, I'd hop onto an occasional pitch meeting that he would set
Right.
up, um, but no, I mean, he worked really hard. He had a few go-to people that he already kind of had, you know, in his back pocket who were interested in projects he brought to them. Um, so, I mean, it took a good year, and we were up to the last minute trying to find that last little bit of money we needed.
Right.
Um, but it wasn't, like I said, for to be fortunate enough to have a friend like Seth who, he's skilled at that. He's much more skilled at that than I am, and he recognizes that, and he knows, you know, he knows what he brings to the table, and he knows what I bring to the table, and so he's willing to work with that, and
That's
I
awesome.
appreciate that a lot. So
No, it's important to be able to make those relationships and genuine relationships. I mean, you guys sounds like you work together really well, and that blossomed into a business relationship.
for sure.
And when it's genuine like that, that's when it's beautiful because then you're really out there and you're making things that matter. And it's not that I think some people get into the business and think, well, I'm just going to network like crazy and use everybody around me. And that's not the way it is. I
Mhm.
mean, you have to
Absolutely.
cultivate genuine relationships and then see where they lead, which is can be a beautiful thing.
For
So
sure.
let's talk about the single location because it's so ambitious. I'm of the school of thought that if you're writing a single location film, it's some of the most difficult writing you can do because you're putting
Mhm.
yourself in a box and you only have so much sand in that sandbox to play with. So
Sure.
you came up with the um, concept, which I thought was great. People living in their car. I mean, because you haven't really seen that. So I love the wage disparity angle there. And
Mm.
then the struggles that people have with that, I thought was fantastic, especially nowadays. Everybody's struggling with money. So you're really kind of hitting a nerve there, which is awesome. But walk me through, like, you're writing this script, you're doing it in a single location. Obviously, you don't want it to be talking heads. So what were you trying to do to work through that issue?
Well, for the first couple of drafts, it really was just a matter of letting the characters talk, and letting them and finding out who they were. That
Mm-hmm.
tends to be how I approach most stories. It's kind of the Stephen King method, where he kind of famously doesn't plot, and
Yeah.
neither do I. I just kind of start with the idea and just see what happens. So it naturally becomes character driven that way, because I'm 100% depending on the characters making choices that will keep the story going. But once I had an idea of who they were, I don't know, I just started a couple of different things. One thing was trying to make sure that there was a new reveal like every 10 pages, that kind of thing, making sure that I almost started writing in like 10-page increments at a certain
I like
point.
that.
Where it's like, okay, I almost, for a while there, now I abandoned this after a bit, but for a stage of the writing process,
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about, if I made this on a really, really low budget, and it was just me shooting it myself with a couple of friends,
Okay.
and I had to do it in like 8 nights, this is my thinking process. Like, how should I structure the script then, if I was thinking about that? So I was writing like in 10-page increments that could be theoretically shot, you know,
That's
in a
really
single kind of
brilliant. Yeah, because
night.
every producer director I've worked with shot 8 pages a day. And they've always told me
Mm.
10 pages is the most you can do, 8 pages a day. So the fact that you're writing in 10-page increments, because that's how you're thinking of shooting it, I think is really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and that got me, I think, through the bulk of like figuring out the structure of it. Um, once Seth kind of got involved though, and I figured out that we were going to be able to make the movie for a little bit more money than I initially thought. It's still
Mm-hmm.
a very low budget movie, but I mean, like, my initial thought for this concept was no budget. It was literally
Yeah.
just DIY, and we did a little better than that. Once I kind of knew that, oh, I don't have to do it in 8 days. I can do it I've got like 19 days to shoot. So
Wow.
I started letting the script sort of flesh out and blossom from there. But that 10-page increment approach got me through the early stages of the development of the structure of the script and stuff like that. So
I love it. I love the goal-oriented aspect of it too, because there's so many times writers will be out there, they'll struggle and they'll sit down and be like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. But if you just set the goal, like, I'm gonna hit 10 pages today, and then you just
mm,
make that happen. I love that. So it gives you something to strive for. And really, if you're writing a 90-page script, right? Because we're
mm,
going to assume you're not going to go 120 pages. We're not crazy.
right.
That's 9 days. And in your mind, that seems fathomable. It seems like, oh yeah, I can do that, you know? So
Yeah.
I actually think that's really cool.
And
Um,
like the execution of that then, in terms of like, or like the reality of that with writing, was like, you know writing 10-page sequences that could, theoretically be set up and shot within that time frame.
that's
Thinking about,
cool.
like, well, if I move them outside of the car, that's a new setup, so let this 10 pages take place here
Right.
in this confined space, and then I'll move it outside for 10 pages, that kind of thing.
I know. And as a writer, you're making that harder on yourself, but because of that,
Mm,
you're making yourself better. You're forcing yourself to write
right.
interesting, compelling scenes. That was really cool. And it does not feel like an indie film. I mean, it feels like you had a big budget for it. I really like the mysterious strangers that are kind of lurking about in these non-human masks that are just creepy enough, and that go like, what the hell is going on? So that keeps you kind of drawn into the story as well, on
Mm,
top of the two characters arguing, trying to figure out their situation. So you build up enough um questions within the suspenseful environment. So did you like when did you shift of going, okay, I'm doing horror, but I'm really doing suspense because I want to keep people on the edge? Like when did you kind of land on that genre?
Pretty early on, once I started writing and realized that it kind of has to be that if I'm going to
Okay.
keep it in this one location and keep it
Yeah.
two characters, um, there's only so much you can start making happen before you kind of paint yourself into a corner.
Right.
And so, I realized like if too much happens too fast, like I had to build it, I had to
Yeah.
build up a situation where they would choose to stay and then introduce a situation where they can't leave now and then
Right.
introduce a situation where they can justify not being too scared, and so you just it's a matter of like layering in so that they stay long enough to become the victims of the story but
Yeah.
not drag it out so long that it doesn't make any sense for them to do so. And just the natural back and forth, tug of war of trying to make all that mesh together, just naturally define the structure of the film as being this sort of slow burn thriller. And to that end, I realized too, like I kind of learned in the process of like writing this what I feel makes for slow burn, what makes a slow burn work, which is really to not necessarily adhere to like a typical arc structure, or a goal
Okay.
oriented structure where it's like, where the characters have a goal of, I'm going to accomplish this and then we're going to, have a setback and then we're going to do,
Right.
it for slow burn to work, it really has to be about a series of reveals that slowly kind of like unfold. It's me showing my hand at very deliberate times within the unfolding of that story, all kind of leading up to essentially a single idea, a single climax,
Right.
um, as opposed to it being sort of, again, like driven by the characters actively deciding what they need to achieve and going after it. Um, I don't think slow burn works in that structure, in that format
Yeah.
so well. It just becomes slow then, because then the audience knows where it's going. The audience
Right.
knows what needs to happen for the movie to end, and they're waiting for that. And if you drag that out, then it's just slow. But if you keep the audience kind of in the dark as to what this is all really about and make that the point, then the movie itself becomes the suspense. It
Yeah.
becomes the thing that they're following. Um, so yeah, that was my kind of approach to the structure and the slow burn suspense aspect of it. And
I
again, it
like
all
that.
kind of just comes out of just naturally where I chose to set it and those limitations.
No, I think it's good. And you're not trying to because one thing I've noticed in the industry right now is people take upping the stakes too far and it almost
Mm,
becomes like ludicrous or a parody of structure. And they don't mean to do it. It's just that they know they're supposed to up the stakes in order to keep the audience. But what I like about this is it feels like a very natural revelation of what's happening to these two characters and how it's affecting their relationship and how their reality is being revealed, which I thought was really cool. And so it stays very grounded in its approach, which I think makes it very accessible. So
yeah.
for those who are listening, um, say there's somebody out there listening right now who has a script. Like, what do you recommend for that writer out there who's like, you know what, I got to make this thing on my own. This guy did it. Talk to that person for me. What do you recommend to them to make it happen?
Yeah, again, I think it's starting with what you have, which is kind of the thing that everybody says. But like with me, I sort of ignored that advice for a long time until finally it was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Um, and yeah, just it can be difficult because you don't want to limit yourself too much, but you really do kind of have to think about the reality of shooting what you're writing,
Yeah.
and not just in terms of like, um, not just in terms of how many effects do you have or how many characters do you have, but really like like I said, my decision to sort of write in those 10-page increments was really kind of structured around, very deliberate ideas about what I could realistically shoot in a given time frame, in terms of like setups and
Yeah.
blocking and moving things around and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to consider, in those sort of minutia kind of details.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so what I would say is just think about what you're writing, how you're going to shoot it.
All right. Well, it's Ghosts of the Void. And do we have distribution yet, or is it out there right now and you're figuring out where it's going?
VOD.
Oh, that's fantastic. Any particular streamer?
I think it'll be out on kind of wherever you can get them. It'll be on Amazon and iTunes,
Well,
Google, all those guys.
congratulations. Yeah, congratulations on the wide release with that, man.
Yeah, thank you.